Welcome to Reflection Wednesday. How are you coming along identifying and understanding the key concepts of Ruth? Just take a 10-second look at the following slide as a reminder what the key concepts and issues are of Ruth, at least in my reading. Dissertations have been written on each of these key concepts, and we don't have to be so thorough, for our purpose is to understand the message that the author has in Ruth for ourselves and to share that with others. Now, during the Judges period, it was shortly after the Israelites entered and settled into the land of Canaan. It was characterized by an ebb and flow of faithfulness to the Lord, tribalism, foreign invasions, and rule. And there's a line in the book of Judges that says, "In those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes." And so there's a bit of unevenness to the book of Judges, that period. Though, as we look at Ruth, there doesn't seem to be a lot of chaos in the background other than the personal tragedy. Now, the relationship between Naomi, Orpah, and Rachel sounds akin to levirate marriage law, which we find in Deuteronomy 25, referred to in Genesis 38 and Matthew 23. Now, Naomi's age made this impractical because she couldn't get married and produce children. But I think the key concept there is women kind of had to bond together if they didn't have a father or sons or husbands in order to protect themselves and to survive. Moab were a people that began from an incestual relationship. That's in Genesis 19. Later on, their king Balak hires a prophet Balaam to place a curse upon the Israelites as they skirted the border of Moab, moving toward Canaan. That's Numbers 22. Now, because of that, descendants of Moab were forbidden to join the assembly of the Lord. That's Deuteronomy 23, about verse 3. However, this regulation does not seem to apply to David when he becomes king. Gleaning. Now, harvesting, according to Leviticus 19 and 23 and Deuteronomy 24, it tells farmers that they're not to harvest to the edges of their field, but let that grow, and if a sheaf of grain bound up falls off the wagon, they're supposed to leave it there, because this would give the poor an opportunity to go to these fields and get grain for themselves. A redeemer kin was a relative who had the authority to purchase back property that another relative had lost. This would keep the property within the family line, and we can read about this in Deuteronomy chapter 25, verse 5. Genealogies in biblical times tended to list just the fathers. And it was the fathers who held the tribes together. For example, in Joshua chapter 7, about verse 13 and following, we see kind of the ordering of the people of Israel. First, there's the nation, then there's the tribes, then within tribes, the clans, and then within clans, families, and within the families are smaller families, and then we get to individuals. This is what gave a lot of Israel identity, their tribe, their clan, their family, so which is why they listed it. However, the book of Ruth tells us that there's more stories in these genealogy lists than we are given. And finally, we have chesed. Chesed is kindness or loyalty. It is how God interacts with his people. and it is faithfulness and kindness among people themselves. It's a word used 5 times in Ruth. However, it's more difficult to track because most English translations will use 2 or 3 words to translate it depending on the context. Now, I believe, and we'll talk about this later, that Chesed is the theme of this short book. That is, God's loyalty is the theme of this book, and people can reflect that loyalty. We see it first used in Ruth chapter 1, verse 8. The New English translation uses the word devotion for it. We see kind of the opposite, though there's not an opposite term for Chesed, in verse 21, when Naomi basically says that the sovereign one has treated me harshly. He's left me. He's caused me to return empty-handed. That's really a challenge to the loyalty, the kindness, the faithfulness, the chesed of the Lord. Next time, let's describe the interaction between the 3 main characters of Naomi, Ruth, and Boaz, and see if you can also find evidence why some people think Ruth is a fictional story. Well, until then, God bless.